There are moments in life when Libra hears no loud noise at all, no event dramatic enough to be called a turning point, and yet you feel it clearly. The rhythm of life begins to slow down. Not because you are losing strength, but because your soul has started to settle. You wake up in the morning, the world is still there, familiar, unchanged. But inside you, there is a strange kind of empty space. It doesn't hurt. It isn't overwhelming sadness. It is simply a quiet that lasts longer than usual. And it is in that quiet that you begin to hear things that noise once drowned out. Libra has spent a long time living as the keeper of balance. You learned to feel others before feeling yourself. You learned to adjust, to soften, to shift, so that nothing around you would tilt too far in any direction. But when silence begins to speak, you suddenly realize something subtle but profound. Some things that once made your heart race, that once inspired you to try harder, to give a little more, no longer call your name the same way. Not because you have lost the ability to love, but because you have grown to the point where you no longer respond to what was never truly yours. This silence arrives gently. It does not pull you out of life. It does not make everything collapse. It simply asks you to pause a little longer before making a decision, to hesitate before answering a promise, to think more carefully before continuing something that once felt automatic. And in those moments that seem empty at first, you begin to understand an important truth. Not everything that once mattered is meant to stay forever. Some chapters exist only to teach you a lesson, and then leave quietly when you're ready to move forward. Libra is the sign of fairness. Yet so rarely do you offer that fairness to yourself. You are used to listening, to understanding, to harmonizing. You are used to asking if others are okay, if they are happy, if they are hurt. But in this silence, another question begins to rise. At first, very softly, then more clearly. What about me? What does my heart need now? That question does not demand an immediate answer. It simply stays long enough that you can no longer ignore it. You may not see the new path yet. You may not know what waits ahead, but you begin to feel this truth in your body. You no longer want to keep walking old roads just because they are familiar. The things that once felt safe now carry a quiet sense of tightness. And this is not a sign of loss. It is a sign of expansion. When the soul grows, it needs more space to breathe. This silence also brings a very special kind of healing. It allows you to rest from the role of always being right, always being graceful, always being balanced. It gives you permission to stop explaining why you've changed, why you are no longer the same. In that stillness, you reconnect with your true values, the ones untouched by expectations, untouched by outside standards. You remember what it feels like to be yourself without effort. And then, just when everything seems still, a gentle current begins to form. Not loud, not rushed, but steady enough to carry you forward. You don't need to move fast. You don't need to know the destination. You only need to allow yourself to stay in this moment a little longer, to listen a little deeper, to trust a little more. Because sometimes, before life opens a new door, all it asks is that you become quiet enough to realize the old door closed long ago, and that the light ahead has been waiting for you to step toward it, naturally. When that light finally touches you, the first thing you feel is not overwhelming happiness, but a deep sense of relief. As if you've just set down a bag you've been carrying for far too long, so long you forgot how heavy it really was. There is an ordinary afternoon, nothing special about it, no moment worth marking on a calendar. And yet, in that quiet instant, you suddenly realize how tired you are. Not tired because you've done too much, but tired because you've spent so long constantly adjusting yourself to fit the world around you. For a long time, you believed this was simply who you were, that loving meant understanding, that balance meant yielding, that peace sometimes required silence. But then there is a very still place inside you where you no longer want to explain yourself, not because you are angry, not because you want distance, simply because you no longer have the energy to keep doing what goes against your inner truth. That moment arrives slowly. It doesn't interrupt your life. It doesn't force you into immediate decisions. It only causes you to pause before answering familiar questions. You notice you no longer reply to messages just to keep the peace. You no longer nod yes to invitations that weigh your heart down. You no longer smile in spaces where you have to shrink yourself just to be accepted. And the strange thing is this: when you stop compromising, the world does not fall apart the way you once feared. No one turns away dramatically. No doors slam shut in your face. Instead, there is a very real, very clear emptiness. At first, that emptiness confuses you because you're used to always holding on to something, always filling the space, always keeping things together. But slowly, you realize that this space is where you finally begin to breathe deeply again. In that stillness, Libra begins to understand something important. Comfort is not always peace. Some forms of comfort are built on ignoring your own feelings, on overlooking boundaries that are quietly being crossed. And when you choose truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable at first, you feel yourself standing taller, steadier, more grounded. You no longer want to live inside half-finished stories, inside connections that make you constantly wonder where you stand. You begin to value clarity, even when clarity leads to letting go. Not because you know longer care, but because you've learned how to love without losing yourself. You may not yet have a name for what is happening, but deep inside, you know you've crossed an important inner line. From here on, your choices are no longer guided by the fear of losing, but by honesty with yourself. And the moment you stop compromising with what no longer fits, a new space begins to open. Slowly, gently. Wide enough for connections that move at the right rhythm, that feel truer, that arrive naturally, without force, without strain. And then, within that new space, you begin to notice something quietly surprising. What no longer fits does not need to be pushed away. It releases itself, gently, like a dry leaf letting go of the branch when the season has already changed. There are no arguments, no declarations, no dramatic moment to mark an ending. Just one ordinary day. You look around and realize you are no longer standing in the same place as people who once felt very familiar. You are no longer moving at the same rhythm. Not because someone is wrong or someone is right, but because the path itself has begun to split into different directions. Conversations that once lasted for hours now grow shorter. Promises repeated many times, but never followed by action, fade quietly into silence. Plans that once made you feel safe suddenly no longer carry that feeling. And what surprises you most is this: you no longer feel the need to hold on to any of it. For a long time, Libra believed that holding on was a form of responsibility. You thought that if you were patient enough, understanding enough, if you tried just a little harder, everything would work out. But now, as your hands finally relax, you understand something very clearly. Some things exist only through effort and strain. And when the effort is released, they fall away on their own, leaving behind a space that feels real, honest, and no longer as heavy as before. There were relationships that once took up so much room in your life, yet when they leave, you don't feel the loss you once imagined. Instead, there is a quiet sense of relief, as if you've returned something you carried for far too long without realizing it was never truly yours to keep. You don't blame anyone. You don't blame yourself. You simply accept that every connection has its season, and sometimes that season ends before we feel ready. You begin to trust a very different principle now. What belongs to you will stay without being held tightly. Those meant for you will never make you question your place in their life. The right paths will never ask you to sacrifice your peace just to keep walking. That belief gives you a new kind of stability, not loud, not showy, but deep enough that you no longer turn back for what has already left. As old connections fall away, the empty space that appears no longer frightens you. You begin to sense within it a gentle invitation. An invitation to new connections, built on respect, true presence, and a natural harmony that doesn't require explanation. You don't rush to fill the space. You let it remain, long enough for you to change first, long enough for your heart to learn which rhythm it truly wants to move with. And in that rare sense of ease, you slowly understand something important. Letting go is not loss. It is a subtle way for life to rearrange what truly deserves to remain. It is preparation for you to step into a different state of being, one where you no longer live from what is familiar, but begin to open yourself to what genuinely reflects who you are right now. And it is within that state that an ordinary morning arrives and somehow feels quietly unfamiliar. You don't wake up to the urgency of an alarm clock, but to a clear sensation inside. Not excitement, not anxiety, just a gentle sense of awareness. You sit up, watch the light move across the room, and for the first time in a long while, you no longer feel like you are chasing a rhythm of life that was never truly yours. Libra begins to realize how long you've grown used to living smaller. Smaller in your desires, smaller in your needs, smaller even in the dreams that once made your heart race. You believed it was the way to stay harmonious, to avoid discomfort, to keep everything balanced. But now, as the old layers quietly fall away, a simple truth becomes clear. Balance does not come from shrinking yourself. It comes from standing in the right place. You begin to look at your time differently. It is no longer something to give away without limit, no longer an empty space meant to carry the expectations of others. Each passing hour feels more valuable, not because you fear wasting it, but because you understand your energy is not infinite. You become more selective about what you say yes to, where you show up, which conversations you choose to be part of. And this doesn't make you distant. It makes you fully present where it truly matters. At the same time, the way you see your own worth begins to shift quietly. You no longer measure yourself by external approval, by praise, or by attention. You start to feel your value in the calm that comes from saying no, in the relief of not needing to explain yourself over and over, in the confidence that comes from knowing what you're doing and why. That value doesn't need to be proven. It only needs to be respected, first and foremost, by you. And as you change the way you value yourself, the world begins to respond in subtle ways. Opportunities no longer arrive through urgency or pressure. They come more slowly, but with greater clarity. You notice you are no longer pulled toward invitations that sound attractive but feel hollow. Instead, doors open at the right moment, at the right pace, as if someone quietly measured everything so it would fit the person you are now. You no longer need to become bigger to be worthy. The moment you stop shrinking yourself, everything begins to shift. A new steadiness forms within you, not loud, not performative, but strong enough that you can walk forward without checking behind you to see if everyone is pleased. And in that steadiness, you sense it clearly. Life is preparing you for different experiences, different connections, different values, all of them built on the foundation of one quiet truth. You have learned how to honor yourself fully and peacefully. And from that sense of calm, a very different kind of movement begins to take shape in your life. It does not arrive as burning ambition or plans that must be executed immediately. It comes quietly, like water finding its way forward once the obstacles are removed. You begin to notice that you are no longer obsessed with the question of doing more just to feel enough. Instead, you observe more carefully where you are standing, how you are giving your energy, and what you are truly receiving in return. For a long time, money carried a quiet sense of anxiety within you, not because you lacked ability, but because you carried a vague fear that if you slowed down, if you said no, if you didn't push yourself a little harder, everything might slip through your fingers. But once you learned how to value yourself, that fear slowly lost its voice. You no longer work just to prove your worth. You no longer take on responsibility simply because you're uncomfortable saying no. You no longer trade your peace for temporary security. And so the flow of money begins to change, naturally, not sudden wealth, not dramatic leaps, but a steady sense of stability that comes from things functioning in the right place. You begin doing work that aligns with who you are now, not who you once thought you needed to become. You give time to projects with depth, to collaborations built on mutual respect, to values that do not require you to abandon yourself. And that alignment creates a steady current, enough to make you feel secure without forcing yourself forward. Libra is deeply sensitive to imbalance, and when your inner world becomes calm, you recognize that money is simply another form of energy. It reflects how you treat yourself, how you set boundaries, how you choose when to stay and when to walk away. When you stop chasing the fear of lack, you also stop attracting situations that keep you in constant worry. Instead, you begin to draw in opportunities rooted in trust, in clarity, in a shared understanding of value without negotiation or strain. There are very ordinary moments that suddenly feel meaningful, spending money without guilt, turning down an offer that sounds appealing but leaves your heart uneasy. They seem small, but they mark a significant shift. Money no longer controls your emotions. You allow yourself to live within your means, to live honestly, to live without self-punishment. And when you do, money stops being a constant concern and becomes a natural part of life, coming and going in a quiet sense of order. More importantly, you begin to feel a new kind of freedom. Freedom does not come from how much you have, but from no longer being ruled by the fear of losing. You know you can create value, and you trust that value will always find its way to be recognized. The trust is not loud, it does not need approval, but it is strong enough to let you move forward slowly and steadily. And within that steadiness, you realize you are entering a very different season of life. One where you no longer ask whether you are worthy because you are living in alignment with what you truly value. When money becomes a natural result of inner balance, you finally have space to consider deeper commitments, longer paths, and what you want to build not only for today, but for the road ahead. A road where stability is no longer a distant wish, but gradually becomes the solid foundation of the life you are creating. And as that foundation slowly becomes solid beneath your feet, you begin to feel something entirely different. There is no longer the urge to chase, no longer the desire to try things just for the sake of trying. Inside you, a quiet certainty takes shape. Like standing at the edge of deep water, you no longer rush to jump in. You move forward step by step, aware of where you're going and why. Libra enters this phase without needing to announce it to anyone. There are no dramatic decisions, no promises spoken loudly for others to hear, only a commitment forming, very quietly, within. You begin choosing to stay with what makes you feel safe in a healthy way, not safe simply because it is familiar. You are no longer drawn to half-hearted relationships, uncertain paths, or promises without weight. It may be a relationship that deepens in the simplest way. No need to prove anything, no need to make it perfect. Just two people fully present, listening long enough, respecting each other's space. You are no longer searching for the feeling of being needed, but for genuine partnership. And when you step into that kind of connection, you realize something important. Stability does not come from holding on tightly. It comes from both people choosing to stay. Or it may be a long-term direction in work or in life, where you no longer change course because of outside influence. You become patient with the process, patient with yourself. You understand that not every result needs to arrive immediately. Some things require time to grow, to take root, to become something you can truly rely on. And you are ready for that, not out of fear, but because you now see the value of building for the long term. Above all else, the deepest commitment may be the one you make to yourself, a promise not to return to what once made you question your worth, not to return to relationships that made you wonder if you were enough, not to return to habits that asked you to trade peace for acceptance. That promise does not need to be repeated out loud. It lives in the choices you make each day, in what you allow, and in what you gently refuse. You begin to understand that maturity is not about enduring more. It is about knowing when to stop, not about sacrificing more, but about protecting the most tender parts of yourself. And when you live in alignment with that commitment, a deep sense of trust begins to form. You trust yourself. You trust that you will no longer lead yourself into places that exhaust your heart. That trust brings clarity to everything around you. You are no longer pulled into choices that keep you hesitating for too long. You know when to move forward and when to pause. And in that clarity life seems to respond with a gentler rhythm. What comes to you feels steady, mature, not loud, but deep enough to place your trust in. When a commitment is formed from self-respect and understanding, it does not confine you. Instead, it creates freedom within, freedom to stay, freedom to connect, and freedom to keep moving forward without the fear of losing yourself along the way. And in that freedom, you begin to hear a very subtle inner call, like a small, steady light, guiding you through the choices ahead with a strength you once believed you did not have. And then, within that steadiness, something very subtle begins to happen. You stop searching for answers outside of yourself the way you once did. You no longer ask so many people what to do, what to choose, where to go next. Not because you've closed yourself off, but because something steady has formed inside you, a quiet inner anchor. Not loud, not demanding, but always present exactly when you need it. There are moments that feel unclear, moments when every option looks the same, when logic doesn't have enough information, when emotion stays silent. In the past, those moments made you restless, indecisive, even anxious, afraid of choosing wrong. But now, within that very uncertainty, Libra senses a strange kind of certainty. Not the confidence that needs to be displayed, but a deep knowing of when to pause and when to move forward. Your intuition no longer speaks through impulse. It doesn't pull you toward temporary desire. It doesn't push you to react out of fear. It speaks through stillness. A stillness deep enough to notice what weighs on your chest, what makes your breath tighten, and what quietly opens something inside you, even just a little. You begin to trust those small signals because you see how rarely they lead you the wrong way. Sometimes it's the feeling of not responding immediately to an offer, even when it sounds appealing. Sometimes it's a gentle pull to stay with something simple, something understated, that brings lasting peace. You don't need to explain these choices to anyone. You don't need to prove that you're right. All you need is the sense of clarity that settles in after the decision is made. That is enough. Your intuition becomes like a small light in the fog. It doesn't illuminate the entire road, but it shows you the next step. And as you move forward one step at a time, you notice something important. You avoid many of the old cycles. Mistakes that once drained you appear less and less. Not because you control everything better, but because you've learned to listen before things go too far. You also begin to understand that intuition is not separate from kindness. It doesn't make you cold. It doesn't make you distant. Instead, it helps you know when to open your heart and when to keep space. It allows you to feel the true rhythm of a relationship, of an opportunity, of an invitation. And when that rhythm doesn't align, you no longer adjust yourself just to fit. In the quiet of these small decisions, a deep trust begins to form within you. You trust yourself to know when to stop, when to move forward, and when to wait a little longer. That trust doesn't make you invincible, but it frees you from blaming yourself when things aren't perfect. You understand that every choice is part of the journey, and you are walking that journey with more presence than ever before. And as you move this way, unrushed, undivided, life seems to respond with a different rhythm of its own. What comes to you arrives with clarity from the beginning. What is not meant for you reveals itself early, so you don't wander for too long. Within that small, steady light, you feel yourself moving closer to a deep sense of ease. A place where you no longer brace yourself against the future because you have learned how to trust the sound of your own footsteps in the present. And then, once you've traveled far enough to no longer doubt yourself, something simple yet profound begins to happen. You realize that life is not as harsh as you once believed. It's just that, for a very long time, you placed too much on your own shoulders. Too much responsibility, too many expectations, too many rules about how things were supposed to be done. You became so used to holding everything together that you forgot you also deserve support. There is a small moment. Maybe you're sitting alone in a quiet room, or maybe you step outside and feel the air touch your skin. In that moment, you allow yourself to soften, not to give up, but to release the tension. You stop asking if you've done enough, if you've been good enough, if you've earned the right to be here. You simply are. And for the first time in a long while, You feel no need to become someone else to be accepted. Libra begins to understand that living more gently does not mean living carelessly. It means living at the right pace, within your capacity, aligned with what you truly need. You allow yourself to rest without guilt. You allow yourself to receive help without feeling weak. You allow good things to come into your life without immediately searching for reasons to doubt them. And that permission opens a very different door inside you. When you stop straining to prove yourself, the world around you softens too. Relationships feel lighter because you're no longer holding a role together. Opportunities arrive with a sense of flow, not force, not urgency. You realize that when you stop resisting, stop defending, life begins to cooperate in the most natural way. Not because everything becomes perfect, but because you are no longer fighting yourself with every step. You may find yourself smiling more often at very small things. A peaceful morning, a conversation that doesn't require effort, a sense of fullness that has nothing to do with possessions. These moments are quiet, but they last. They remind you that happiness is not a distant destination, but a state you allow yourself to enter when you stop demanding constant strength from yourself. And as you allow life to be kind to you, you naturally begin to treat others more kindly as well, not through sacrifice, but through presence. You no longer give from a place of depletion, but from a place that has already been filled. It creates a beautiful circle where kindness does not exhaust you, and love no longer feels like a burden. In 2026, the greatest turning point for Libra is not a single event, but a deep inner shift. You step out of the role of balancing everything for everyone and into the role of living as yourself. No forcing, no proving, no waiting for permission from the outside world. When you give that permission to yourself, everything else seems to fall into place. And in that bright, quiet stillness, you understand something clearly. This journey does not end here. It begins the moment you believe you deserve a life that is gentler, truer, and more complete. You keep walking, not rushed, not afraid. With a calm, steady trust that you are moving in the right direction, and that is enough. For today, for 2026, and for everything that is waiting just ahead.